and welcome to the MBTI video. So while we're on a roll, we've talked about your behavioral styles. I thought I would just do you a quick and dirty introduction to personality profiles. One of the most famous personality profiling tools is called MBTI. It stands for the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator. And I have to share with you a personal story, and it was when my ex-husband and I were looking at separating. We went to see a marriage counsellor, and the marriage counsellor did the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator test on us, and I'd never done anything like this before in my life. And so we both filled out the survey. We went back for our next session, and the counsellor sat there and he looked at us and went, "Wow, aren't you a pair, hey?" And he said, it's very interesting the results we have here, because in the survey that I've given you, the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, there are 4 dichotomies, which is 4 areas that you can be different on. And he said, the thing about you two is that it's not just that you're a little bit different. You are different on all 4 of those, and you're different to the extremes. And so he said in that moment, you now have a choice. You need to either start to connect and celebrate your differences, or if you can't do that, I would call it a day. And it was a really powerful lesson for me, because I'd been with my ex-husband for 7 years, and we'd been together for 4 years and then married for 3 years. And our son, Jazz, at the time was 2 years old. So we'd just been married. We had our first child. He's 2 years old, and we just can't get along. And in hindsight, we probably never should have married and had children, because we just didn't really share values or anything. But, when you're young and having fun and partying in London, you don't really talk about that stuff, do you? So anyway, we decided to call it a day. But what was really beautiful is we had the most wonderful separation. And Darren and I, my ex-husband and I, are great mates now. But back in that moment, in that counsellor's office, I looked at Darren for the first time in 7 years, and I looked at him and I thought, oh my goodness, you're different. Oh, different. I thought you were wrong. And I didn't say it out loud, thankfully, but it gave me this big kind of wake-up call to go, here I was judging Darren for 7 years as being wrong for not being more like me. Why couldn't he just make decisions quickly? Why couldn't he just be more fun and spontaneous? Why couldn't we just party and live it up a little bit more without having to worry about everything, without having to analyze everything, without having to make everything annoying, And you're probably going to be able to guess very easily when we get into the different styles where I sat and where Darren sat on the dichotomies. But it was a really big light bulb moment. So the reason I share this sort of stuff in the Freedom Academy is because I really want term 1 to be a deep dive into life and understanding yourself as a human. And I recognize the fact that no one model is the be-all and end-all that's going to tell us everything about the human race. I love the woven tapestry of knowing a little bit about all the things and then going deeper on the things that resonate with you, but having enough insight to recognize that no one thing can be the be-all and end-all. So with that being said, let's bring up my iPad. I'll go over here. And let's look at the 4 dichotomies of the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator. I'm just going to make myself slightly smaller. So if you've done this is actually, the 16 personalities profile is probably one of the best free adapted MBTI surveys. You can pay to have a proper Myers-Briggs Type Indicator test done. Again, this is work built on the research of Carl Jung, or you can just do the 16 personalities test. I came out as both in the same. 16 personalities is free, and I reckon it's pretty cool. So let's look at the different dichotomies, shall we? So I'm just going to see where my line lands. Okay, this is good. So the first one looks at where you get your energy from. And so you could be either introverted or an extrovert. And there's a lot of misconception around what an introvert and an extrovert is. A lot of people think, introverts are shy and timid, and extroverts are bombastic and loud. But really, what the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator is looking at is saying, as a human, you either draw your energy from being alone, you recharge by taking yourself away from crowds, but you might also love socializing with people, but it just gets too exhausting if you do it too often. Or you draw your energy by being with people and around crowds, bright lights and city, and that's how you recharge, but you still like being alone, and every now and then that's quite a nice thing for you as well. So I'm actually very high on the extrovert, but I also love a bit of me time. Here's the interesting thing. As a high extrovert, if I spend too much time on my own, I become lazy, fatigued, and exhausted. So it's a very interesting conundrum, and a lot of introverts would find that hard to believe, but I actually get a lot of energy from being at parties or being around people. And I remember when we first launched the business, The 7 Effect, Amy and I would go to different conferences and seminars to learn and soak up as much as we could from all the different business gurus. And I'd be in the room with 300 people and I'm like, this is great and I'm loving it. And we'd walk out and we'd go and have dinner afterwards and I'd be buzzing with ideas and full of energy. Whereas Amy would be like, oh God, I'm getting a headache. And she just needed to recharge. And I used to read that as she was not enjoying it. But the reality was she loved it, but it was just very draining on her. So that's the first one. It's about where you draw your energy from. The next one is about where you get your information from. So we all draw on information to take in and make our decisions and judgments of the world. So we can be sensing, and think of sensing as the 5 senses. So if I'm a high sensing person, it means for me to be able to believe it, for me to get my information, I need to see it, I need to touch it, I need to taste it, I need to smell it, I need to hear it. It needs to be like, show me the thing, let's actually look at it. It needs to be tangible in my eyes. Whereas if you are intuitive, you draw your information almost from a sixth sense. It's like this gut sense. And, it's fascinating watching intuitive and sensing types try and have a conversation. And I remember years ago, I'm up here, as you can imagine. Years ago, I was running some training for a room full of engineers, very high sensing types. It's like we need to see, feel, touch, taste, the logical things. We've got the procedures, we've got the structure, the formula to follow. It's all very pragmatic stuff. There's no sixth sense stuff in here. And I'm talking conceptual, and they're like just wanting straight order. Give us the structure, talk us through it. It's like, well, it's just this kind of sense of getting your ideas and creating it out here. And they were all like, yeah, nah, you're losing us, Jody. You're losing us. So again, different communication styles. So once we have our information, we make our decisions. And so the dichotomy around decisions is we can be a thinker or a feeler. So the thinker makes their decision based on logic and head-based stuff, facts, figures, logic, pragmatics. The feeler makes their decisions based on emotions, people, feelings, the relationships of what's going to happen once those decisions are made. And then finally, we have lifestyle impact, and you can have judging or perceiving. And so judging is very much like follow the plan, make the rule. It doesn't mean they're judgmental. It means that once you've got the plan, you stick to it and you follow that procedure through and through. Whereas perceiving is, I don't know, we'll kind of just work it out and make it up as we go. So I'll give you a really good example of judging and perceiving. Years ago, two of my girlfriends and I were going to a party, and it was up in the hills, and we got a bit lost. And in the back was my friend Paige, very high judging. Driving was me, and my co-pilot was my friend Beck. We're both very high perceiving. So Beck and I are like, nah, we're pretty sure it's around here somewhere. We'll be right. And Paige is in the background going, we need to get out the map. We need to find the way. What was the address? She just wanted those facts, figures, and she wanted to make sure that we could get back on track and not lose our path. Judging people like to have a plan and they like to follow a structure, whereas perceiving people like to kind of roll by the seat of their pants and let's see how things flow out. So when you look at it, you can be either an E or an I. You will be an S, sorry. Spit it out, Jody. You'll be an E or an I, extrovert or introvert. An S for sensing, intuition is N. This is where I was going, like, hang on a minute. The I is not matching here. But anyway, you can be an S or an N. You'll be a T or an F. You'll be a J or you'll be a P. And so I, my friends, am an ENFP. My ex-husband was an ISTJ. And we both live at the sort of extreme ends of these. Now, I did say before that some of these things, like our behavioral styles and our personality profiles, we can create awareness around, but the idea is not to create change, but instead to accept and adapt to the lot that we've been dealt or who we are. Interestingly enough, when I spent 7 years in the corporate world, I used to do this regularly. So I would take people through these models and run workshops and team stuff around behavioral styles, and it was a lot of fun. Lots of light bulb moments pinging in the room all of the time. People loved it. But what I did notice is that whilst very rarely people would change on the middle things, sometimes people would change here or here depending on the roles that they were in. And they weren't huge changes. The other thing is some people live very close to the middle, which means they can easily adapt to either side. So again, have a bit of fun with the 16 personalities tool and find out what style you are and post it in the group. Let us know where you're at and what your strengths are. And it's great for me to know as your coach as well how I can guide you to make sure that you're building a business that's fun and not stressful to grow. Okay, that's it for this video. In the next video, I'm going to take you through one more model, slightly different to these two. It's called the 7 neurological levels, and it's just going to really map out some layers of your life that you can look to explore. Where are you now, and where do you want to be, or where do you ideally need to be operating from in order to achieve your business and life goals this year? I'll see you there.